Something makes me mad about what they're doing right now. We'll talk about that tonight. Great news out of Wisconsin. It's not all bad out there. We'll talk about that. Mike Benz joins us again to get us all smart. All that's coming up tonight on I'm Right. Let's talk about power and money and nations and how they operate at the end. You know what? Let's start there before I get to the money power portion of what's going on in the country with the debt and the deficit and what they're doing to us and all this stuff. You want to know one of the things that's always bothered me when I read about history or watch a documentary about history or when I get into history at all, one of the things that's bothered me is this. When nations of any size, of any kind, when they're starting to go downhill a little bit, crumble, come apart, I don't know what word or what phrase you want to put on it, but when things are towards the back end, you're on the back nine, right? When it's finally done, the people who are ruling the nation, in charge of the nation, oftentimes, and honestly, it's the most common thing, they don't go down when the country goes down. You know, you don't go from being king of wherever, Zimbabwe, and the country falls, and wow, you're sitting there begging for spare change on the corner like everyone else, like the citizens. No. The king, and all the king's men, of course, all his administrators, they always seem to nance off to Argentina, to a villa they have somewhere. And of course, historically, they always describe the king and all his men as living in exile. You know, he was forced to live in exile, and you dig into it, and he was in a castle with all his servants. Lived out the rest of his days in luxury. Why does this happen? Why is this such a common historical tale? Because towards the end of an empire, when things go bad, the evil men who are destroying the empire bleed the treasury dry. Instead of feeling a duty to their nation, whatever that nation may be, instead of trying to reverse the trend, turn things around, they just look at that big pot of gold in the treasury and they say, let's fill up our pockets with some of that before we check out of here. What's going on here in America? Well, this number is a little bit staggering, but I just want you to wrap your mind around this. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, right? Those three. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. They now are 84% of total revenue. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the numbers. They're huge, but just know that our government takes in $4 trillion. It's a little more than that. Our government takes in a little over $4 trillion every year. On those three things alone, government now spends 84% of that $4 trillion on those three things, and that number is increasing. It's not as if it's staying right there. That number is going up. So what does that mean? Well, you want a military? Think that's important? Any of the other duties the federal government has? They're all lumped into that teeny tiny 16% that is left. I mean, my goodness, this year alone, the interest on the debt will exceed defense spending. Let me repeat that again so you understand that. All those ships, all those planes, all those missiles, all those bases, all those troops, all those uniforms and bullets and bombs, the interest on the national debt, just paying the interest, you're not touching the principal payment, the interest, it will exceed our defense spending in this country. What's happening right now is, all right, I don't want to say late stages, but I'm going to put it this way. I don't know what America is going to look like 50 years from now, but it will not look like it looks today. Because the debt crisis that's coming, I'm not going to say it's going to end the country. I'm not going to say that. You could come up with in your head a scenario where it could, but I'm not saying that. But it is going to forever alter the life of future Americans. It's coming. And instead of trying to reverse the trend, instead of having the all-hands-on-deck meeting they should be having right now, that shouldn't even be partisan. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, the Green Party, Libertarians, it should be an all-hands-on-deck meeting where you take every part of the government, picture it like a bowl with 100 marbles in it, And it's not that you're figuring out which marbles you have to cut. No. They're all gone. Just dump the bowl of marbles. Now we can go back to the marbles and figure out the few we can put back in the bowl. But we're in emergency time here now. It's not even 10 years away. It's coming. And instead, we are led by the most evil, cowardly, selfish people. The president's bragging about cutting the deficit.
It cuts the deficit by $160 billion. $160 billion. I'm serious. Think about it.
We're not cutting the deficit. We're spending trillions and trillions more than we're taking in. So what does it mean for you? What does it mean for the country? Well, what do you think it would mean if all the people out there are on Social Security, maybe you yourself are on Social Security, what do you think it would mean for not just them, for the United States of America, if everyone on Social Security got 20-some% slash in their Social Security check? Pause for a moment before we go to Rand Paul. I just want to lay this out. So the people who rely on it, paycheck to paycheck, when they get their cut, what do? Can they afford the rent anymore? Food? They might have to move in with the kids. How does that alter the entire economy? How does that alter just the real estate market alone? Children. Think about what just that cut means. Now, I want you to sit back and listen to United States Senator Rand Paul tell you what's coming and when it's coming.
And it's not that I want to have reforms, it's that if we don't have the reforms, there will be no Social Security for the next generation and there will be no Medicare. And it's going to happen pretty quickly. Within the next couple of years, the people who live on the basic smallest amount of Social Security, which I believe is around $700 a month, those people will get a 20% cut in their Social Security unless we reform it. So you have to reform it.
It's coming. And the people who should be saving us, the people who should be having that meeting, none of them are even talking about having the meeting. It's not like a few guys want to have the meeting or a bunch of guys want to have the meeting, but hey, we can't get it in Bob's schedule this week. No one's even discussing having that meeting. Nobody. We're else watching it happen. Government Accountability Office just found $236 billion in improper payments for 2023 alone. 74% of those were overpayments. What's that mean? Well, they're looting the treasury. The people in the government who should be meeting, who should be discussing saving us, they're looting us, pillaging us on the way out the door. Do you want me to go into all the climate stuff? You know, John Podesta, famous Democrat activist John Podesta. Did you know he was paid thousands of dollars by a foreign billionaire funded group? What's this group about? Oh, it's all about the climate change stuff. Climate change this and climate change that and climate change this. Well, so he goes from being a Democrat activist to being a man who works with the Going Green people. Democrats get elected. They work directly with John Podesta. The money gets blood sucked out of your paycheck and handed to their friends. Those ancient historical stories we talked about at the beginning of the show, where the king and all his men, they don't suffer when the people crumble. They leave to their villa. It's happening. You're seeing it happen right now. Look, the president of the United States is involved. Quote, don't mention Joe being involved. It's only when you are face to face. That is former Joe Biden business partner. That's a text he sent to Tony Bobulinski. So let's keep in mind what all that stuff about, the Tony Bobulinski, Joe Biden stuff. Joe Biden as United States Senator, as Vice President, and I'm sure now as President of the United States of America, has become highly invested in China, sending all your taxpayer money over to his business friends in China to build solar panels over there, all while destroying the domestic energy production of any kind here in the United States of America. So while you get poorer, while you watch your power bill double, Joe Biden gets more and more dollar signs added to his bank account, looting the treasury as we go down. Look, All these people care about is money and power. That's it. They don't think like you think. That's what's so criminal. They don't think about America. They don't get misty when the national anthem is playing. Do you remember why the strategic oil reserve has been emptied? Do you remember why that happened? Well, we were coming up on the midterm election, and Joe Biden has destroyed our oil industry, so gas prices were through the roof. Joe Biden was worried about Democrats losing too many seats in the House, and so he drained the strategic oil reserve for emergency purposes only, to save Democrat seats in the House of Representatives. Now it's so low that we can't refill it. They just announced they're not refilling it because prices are too high. We don't even have a strategic oil reserve. Again, looting the treasury, pillaging us on the way out the door. All that may have made you uncomfortable, but I am right. We have an amazing show for you tonight. Now, you just heard where we're going. Do you think making some preparations would be a good idea? You think it might be a good idea to get a hold of Oxford Gold Group and get some things in your physical possession these people can't wreck? They're going to wreck your dollar. They're going to pillage every dime of it. What do you have in your physical possession they can't destroy the value of? What do you have in your retirement account, your 401k, your IRA? Get some precious metals in there, hard assets. Nation states, finance giants, they're acquiring hard assets in bulk right now for a reason. They see what's coming. Let Oxford Gold Group do that for you. Call them, 833-995-GOLD. 833-995-GOLD. We'll be back. Okay, let's talk about illegal immigration and something that I can see plain as day happening in the United States of America. It's crystal clear now. Once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. So, all right, you know the deal. You know the numbers. First 6 months, 1 million illegals. First 6 months, over a 6 month span. Let's call the number 10 million. Right? Let's call the number 10 million for Joe Biden's first term. Let's say, and that's light, but let's say 10 million illegals have been brought into this country. And understand that they're being brought into the country by the American government. I know this is hard, it's a bitter pill to swallow, but your government is hostile to you. The people who run the government are trying to burn down the country. That is where we are. You're an American citizen. I'm an American citizen. We live in a country where the government hates us. So they're bringing these people in. Why, though? Why? Well, on top of the basic communist goal of overwhelming the institutions, Cloward Piven strategy, they've talked about this forever. The communists have written about this. Overwhelm American systems. Education system, healthcare system, overwhelm the debt. We don't even talk about illegals and what they mean for the debt, the deficit. Overwhelm the system, collapse the country. That gives you your communist revolution. You take over, you get to murder all the Americans you don't like. That's been the plan for the longest time. Okay, so that's one basic part of it. But another part of it is this. It's about power. Let's pause on illegal immigration for a moment. You know about the Great Society? That's what it was called. What a name, of course, the Great Society. Well, did you know that black families in the 1950s in the United States of America, 75% of black people in the United States of America in the 50s grew up in a two-parent home? Did you know that? Now, people love to talk about the black community in America today, and they always talk about what? They all vote Democrat. The crime, the fatherlessness. Okay, that's okay. About 30% of black people in America today grow up in a two-parent home. How'd that happen? What happened? Well, let me clue you in on what happened. Even during the terrible segregation time of the 50s and whatnot, white-only restaurants, all that evil crap, the black family was rising and thriving, expanding manufacturing. It was going very well. And then Democrats did something, pay attention, this is going to come back to illegal immigration. Democrats realized, hey, We have an opportunity here. We can steal this voting demographic from Republicans. What will we do? We will massacre the black family. We'll pass a bunch of laws that look really nice, but they'll incentivize the destruction of the black family. And Lyndon Johnson's own words, it's a quote directly attributed to him, is I'll have those, he used the N-word, that's the kind of guy he was, I'll have those blank voting Democrat for 200 years. Here we are in the year of our Lord, 2024. The Great Society, all that welfare crap they passed, blew up the black family. Now they've been a reliable Democrat vote for how long? Bought off by government programs, bought off on purpose by evil Democrats. Now let's come back to today. 10 million. Look, that number's light. Remember, the illegals were pouring in even before Joe Biden took over. They just hit the gas pedal once Joe Biden took over. But let's just make it 10 million. They're all going to stay. You know that, right? We're not deporting hardly anybody. They're all staying. They're welcoming more in. They're encouraging more in as we speak. There's another migrant caravan, as they call it, even though they're illegals, heading north, heading towards America's border. So you brought in 10 million people. You already know the disgusting interpretation of our laws gives these people their children, it gives their children citizenship. So the 10 million, yeah, we all know they're going to get amnesty of some kind in some way. Republicans will help Democrats give them that, but let's act like that never even happens. Let's say none of those 10 million get amnesty. All their children will be American citizens. Social Security numbers, driver's licenses, and they'll be voting American citizens the second they turn 18. Now, let me ask you, how many children is that? Off just the 10 million, how many children? How many people are we talking about here? 20 million? 30? Let's go another generation down. 50 million isn't at all an unreasonable number. 50 million guaranteed new Democrat votes bought off with your taxpayer money. You can see it happening in front of your eyes. It's why they're not, they're doing a bunch of black outreach this year in an election year, of course. Joe Biden's doing that, but you can see they're not even stressing that much. They're not changing things, their policies when it comes to taking in all these illegals in cities like New York and Chicago. Where are they putting the illegals? Stuffing them right in the black neighborhoods, the black schools, the black rec centers. The black people in these neighborhoods are outraged, yelling at them, what are you doing? Why'd I vote for Joe Biden? And yet Democrats aren't removing these illegals, are they? In fact, they're bringing in more. Why is that? Well, they found a new girl. They found a new, reliable voting bloc in the illegals and their children to come. It's really, really bad. And plus, they get all the benefits of the crime, remember. Remember, crime, chaos, angst, all this social anxiety that comes when you bring a bunch of murderers and rapists and drug dealers into the country. It makes people afraid. It makes people turn to government. You see this story out of the Bronx?
The squatters, and the landlord, the owner, has been trying to get them out of the apartment for the longest period of time. And I think he has a court date set. Apparently, because they're squatters of more than 30 days, they came and they were kind of a disruptive force, mainly because there were a lot of them, and you didn't know who was staying there or not staying there. And, the owner of the building had a hell of a time trying to get them out.
Now, De Sosa, Villata, and 7 others were charged with criminal possession of a weapon, criminal possession of a controlled substance, and acting in a manner injurious to a child. All but 2 were released without bail. Now, Villata was already charged with attempted murder for shooting another person in the leg. That was over in Yonkers. As for these other suspects, they are being investigated right now, all tied to a string of robberies.
Yeah. There's a little preview of what's more to come. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about China, Taiwan. Does China have an earthquake weapon? No, I don't think they do. But anyway, we'll talk to Mike Benz about that next. Before we get to Mike, let's talk about you and the timeshare that you think you're stuck in. Lone Star Transfer will get you out of that timeshare, I know you've been calling the timeshare company. I want out. I can't get out. You're sending emails. They're telling you that you're stuck for life, and they've jacked up your annual fees, haven't they? Special assessments. You probably can't even get in the thing. Did you know that over 20,000 timeshare owners have legally and permanently gotten out of their timeshares? All they did was call Lone Star Transfer. You're calling the wrong person. Don't call the timeshare companies. Call Lone Star. Family business. They'll get you out. They guarantee it in writing. 844-310-2646 or go to LoneStarTransfer.com. We'll be back.
I think they're ready. And I think what they're looking for is to particularly see what the United States might do. And they pay very close attention to the situation in the United States. And if they see us in chaos, fighting with each other, distracted, either domestically or, say, in Europe, the Middle East, well, the go signal sure looks like it's come on in that case.
I'm not going to lie. My conspiracy-loving mind is going crazy right now. I can't wait to just have Mike yell at me for my wild theory. So you saw that earthquake in Taiwan last night, and buildings are half over. It's friggin' horrible, right? So say a prayer for those people. And then you saw the news reports that Chinese warplanes are circling, and I thought to myself, does China have an earthquake weapon? Is that a thing that they have? Did they do that to set off an invasion? And I hate the Chi-Coms, but if they did that, that's freaking cool. Hey, Mike, joining me now, Mike Benz, Executive Director of the Foundation for Freedom Online. Mike, does China have an earthquake weapon? If so, that's awesome.
Well, if they did, I feel like 60 Minutes would have already done several in-your-face specials on it. We were just told that Russian brain beams are in vogue now. Basically borrowing from the Marjorie Taylor Greene space laser. We're now into brain beams, so earthquake weapons seem like a natural evolution in our news cycle. I see the Taiwan situation as being, and I'm being slightly glib when I say this, but I see it more as being a bribery game than being a military, bloody warfare game. Our hold over Taiwan's internal politics, which is necessary for our ability to be able to import all the semiconductor chips and all the high technology that Taiwan, it makes it so geostrategically important, is dependent on our funding of Taiwan civil society and Taiwan major political players. As China's economic rise continues, they will be able to outcompete us for soft power influence on Taiwan. And a moment like this, where there's an earthquake, is really one of those moments that come around in the fate of a country and help often decide who wins the bribery game. If you remember, Haiti had a series of major earthquakes and natural disasters and floods. These were opportunities for reconstruction funds to come flooding into the country, and then suddenly major swaths of the country are now owned by those new landowners. You could have a situation like that in Taiwan now, where I'm not anticipating a military strike or threat by China, but the competition for who will provide the reconstruction funds is something that I'll be keeping an eye on.
Okay, so look, if I'm being kind, this administration is not exactly known for their deft foreign policy moves. Who exactly do we trust in the Biden administration to out-navigate Xi Jinping when he's like 5 miles off the coast of his border? I know it's further than that, but it's really close.
Yeah, well, we're probably going to have to wait about 7 months to find somebody who's got their head on straight on that issue. So I can't name anyone in particular in the Biden State Department. I mean, they are truly riding the horse backwards, at full galloping speed. So I agree with your assessment there. And this actually relates to a lot of other things that are happening right now in the news. I mean, I talk a lot, for example, about Ukraine and the role of the Biden first family in the natural gas story. Obviously, there was Burisma, but then there was also the play to privatize Naftogaz, the Ukrainian state-owned gas company. And then it surprised many folks about 6 months ago when the Biden administration announced a pause on LNG exports. Now, to me, I didn't see this as the Biden administration going after the LNG market, going after the liquefied natural gas market. What that pause does is that pauses U.S. exports abroad. But we know that Hunter Biden's private equity firm invested $1.6 billion in Sinopec, China's major gas company. Sinopec is not impacted by that LNG export. Sinopec's competitors are. And in fact, this is one of these situations where it keeps the price of gas high to pause the exports from the U.S. because the U.S., with our fracking miracles, basically become the largest natural gas exporter in the world. With those exports paused, this gives Sinopec and Chinese gas companies the ability not only to increase their market share in the international gas market, but at the same time, they get to make massive more profits because as the supply is constrained with the U.S. exports paused, that means they can draw a larger profit from a bolstered price of the gas they're producing. So it's almost like U.S. foreign policy is designed to maximize profits for China.
No, of course it is. Okay, so that actually leads me to any potential future conflict with China, Mike, whether that be on Taiwan or somewhere else. If there is an actual conflict, God forbid, between us and China, I find this to be the oddest situation historically. I'm sure there are examples, but we need each other. They need us, and we need them. Could we ever actually fight?
It would take a series of escalations, I think, with an opportunity at every point to de-escalate. And I don't think it's even gone through the first sort of iteration of escalations. Obviously, there's a lot of positioning right now in the South China Sea. China has vastly increased the size of its Navy, while the U.S. is completely stalled in that regard. But China has an advantage in that respect because the U.S. has 750 to 800 military bases dotting the entire globe. We are a world army, whereas China is a regional army, and that allows them a tremendous concentration of power. And they are only right now in the early stages of converting their economic dominance into military potential. Obviously, the richer you are as an economy, naturally, over time, the better your military becomes because you're able to convert all of that capital into a military industry. And China has only really begun that process in the past decade. And it's one of these things where right now China is now the largest trading partner to Europe. They now have a larger gross economy than the U.S., but we still have a larger war machine. As every passing year, China gets farther and farther ahead of us economically, it's going to be more and more difficult for us to be able to challenge China militarily. And as I see it, there's not going to be any military move until there's a clear winner. When near peer equals are very close together in military strength, they very, very rarely go to war. It's usually when one party perceives they can wreck another country's military because it's wreckable. And I don't think the U.S. is yet in that state.
That brings me to Ukraine, Mitch McConnell. Well, this is what Mitch McConnell said about why he's remaining in the Senate.
But I'm not leaving the Senate, and I'm particularly involved in actually fighting back against the isolationist movement in my own party and so many other as well. And the symbol of that lately is, are we going to help Ukraine or not?
Mike, why are these people so in love with this? They're lowering the conscription, easy for me to say, age in Ukraine. The country has lost an entire generation of young men. Apparently, they're moving on to the boys, and American politicians love this war.
Well, I can understand, why one might fumble with the word conscription, because conscription, there you go, I did it too, because it's a word we don't use very frequently in the United States. Conscription harkens back to centuries ago. In a free world, to be drafted by force by the military in a war you don't even want to fight is such an alien concept. But really what McConnell is doing there, invoking the word isolationist, is frankly disgusting. This is an attempt to try to harken back to World War II holdouts and calling them, isolationist for not wanting to send their boys to die. And this is really not about isolation. This is about focusing on domestic priorities over foreign policy. The thing that made China so powerful in the past 50 years is that it focused on itself. It focused on its own high-speed rail. It focused on its own, building. We laughed at ghost cities, and there's obviously a lot of, sort of Ponzi scheme elements associated with that. But the fact is they have raised the poor into a middle-class standard. They've built ports. They've built beautiful cities. They have clean subways. And this is partly because they don't have 800 different military bases and aren't involved in paramilitary conflicts and active regime change operations on 6 of the 7 continents of our green planet. And the ability to focus on domestic priorities ultimately does convert into an ideal foreign policy, because you come from a position of strength because of your own internal economy when you go to negotiate with your foreign counterparts at the State Department negotiating table. And you come from the ability to convert a larger war machine because you have a healthier internal economy if you need to truly go to war. We're doing everything backwards. And what this Ukraine situation is really about, it's about the energy play, as I mentioned, with the natural gas story. It's about the military contractors, and it's about investments that are being protected, that were made by BlackRock, that were made by the Chamber of Commerce, that were made from members of the World Economic Forum who have had this plan in motion since the Cold War ended to conquer all of Eurasia, to take the $2 trillion worth of natural hydrocarbons on the Eurasian landmass, to take that from Russia militarily if need be, diplomatically in a perfect world. And the Ukraine piece is the final piece of that jigsaw puzzle, and they're fighting like hell to do it. But at the end of the day, that doesn't help everyday Americans. You could make the argument, if we controlled all of Eurasia, now we were exporting steel, U.S. steel, or U.S. Pepsi products, or U.S. U.S. energy exports to that. Well, we've now shipped our manufacturing abroad. Those aren't converting into U.S. jobs. Those are just converting into essentially Swiss bank accounts for the C-suites of these companies and these financial firms. So the link that Reagan touted about trickle-down economics has been completely severed, and we need to get our own house in order before we go trying to break down other people's houses abroad.
Mike, that was friggin' awesome. Like always, come back soon, my brother. Thank you for making us smarter again. All right. We have a light in the mood next. All right, it's time to lighten the mood. And look, whatever comes this year politically, we can take joy in little things, certain little things. One of the things I personally take joy in, because I'm a bad person, I enjoy that Jill Biden has to hit the campaign trail so often because Joe can't talk, he can't think, he can't function, he can't answer questions. And sometimes Jill does well, and sometimes it goes like this.
But when these polls, like the Wall Street Journal one, land in the White House and he's losing in all the battleground states.
No, he's not losing in all the battleground states. He's coming up and he's even or doing better. So you know what? Once people start to focus in and they see their two choices, it's obvious that Joe will win this election.
All right.
Kind of interrupted, sounded a little desperate. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow.